Hello, everyone. This is Trip, and I'm here with my friend Tim Whitaker. And how are you doing, Tim?
I'm good, man. It's Christmas is over. We had a great Christmas. Family's healthy. I'm doing great.
Oh yeah, and the surviving is thriving sometimes with a house full of children.
Oh my goodness. Is that not the truth? Yes, we are surviving, therefore we are thriving.
Well, I don't remember which the Christmas song where there's a line like the parents can't wait for school to start back again. Um, and um, Cora's like, well, why would the parents want school to start back? And I'm like, we don't think that till at least the 27th.
Well, as a former conservative evangelical, the only Christmas song I know is Christmas Shoes. So I
What
don't know
about
that
Mary
song.
Did You Know?
Oh, I know that one too.
Okay, good,
I know too,
good, good.
but mostly Christmas Shoes.
Just mostly Christmas shoes. Well, I wanted to have you on to hang out a bit and one, hear about your experience at America Fest. Now, I'm going to guess that a lot of homebrew listeners don't know what America Fest is, but they wouldn't need to know anything about it to know they didn't want to go. And it's not
But
because more
yeah,
progressive Christians can't, like have some love for their nation, but I just don't know any of them. They're gonna be like, you know what we need to do? We need to have an America Festival and bring together lots of people. But America Fest is really a really good example of a whole section of the church that, well, I had successfully ignored. My algorithm did not have it in them. They didn't show up there.
hmm
Somehow at large liberal Protestant institutions in Los Angeles and Europe, you just didn't interact with it much. And then we became friends.
yeah. Then I ruined you.
And it is scary. And one of the not too long ago when we were talking about the work you're doing at New Evangelicals and the project Amplify, you started sharing some data just to compare the kind of platforms the people that showed up at America Fest have um, with the ones that I think of as a more like a liberal Protestant, like Sojourners or the
Sure,
Christian
sure.
Century, these kind of things, and it is one invaded my feed, two scared me to death, three that's why I'm excited about Project Amplify. So I want you to kind of like help me help me ruin the end of 2023 for a lot of
Yeah.
homebrew listeners by telling us what's up. So how would you start to kind of introduce what in the world's going on in that part of the church, especially on the internet and organizing, that liberal Protestants tend not to hear about?
Yeah, I'm actually thrilled I'm talking to liberal Protestants because as someone who has, renegotiated their faith and has found a lot of beauty in more liberal Protestant spaces and have found people that are more in tune to social justice issues, things that I do think are more faithful to the gospel, frankly. It has been very shocking to see also how insulated folks can be in other spaces that maybe I had never been a part of. And so I'm glad to do this because I think it's very important for liberal Protestants to really understand what's happening in these more fundamentalist evangelical spaces that are directly either currently affecting our
Yeah.
neighbors or are going to affect our neighbors. So this is not about me saying, the point of this is not, oh, look how crazy the beliefs or theology is. People believe whatever they want. It's, literally a free country in that sense. But when those beliefs start mandating that, okay, now we have to take over society, now we have to start writing laws based on how we view certain theological issues, and we don't care what our neighbors think about that. We have a God-given right to do it. That's when I go, if people aren't aware of what's happening, we're gonna be in a world of trouble, come 2025, et cetera. So I think that's kind of my why I'm so passionate about this. And as someone who grew up in these spaces, I understand how the sausage is made because I helped make it in a lot of ways. And I just don't know if people beyond the bubble are really understanding what's going on. So we can start there.
Yeah.
Regarding American Fest, and this might be a good place to start. So in this world, there's a couple major organizations, they're nonprofits in particular, and one of them is called Turning Point USA. Okay. Turning Point USA is a political movement organization that is really aiming at college age and in high school kids to make them more conservative. So they have like conservative groups on campus and that kind of thing. Okay. Charlie Kirk is the founder of this organization. He started it when he was 20. He's now 30. They've been doing it for 10 years. To give you an idea of how big this organization is, last year alone, they raised $80 million. 80.
That's a
Okay. So
that's a big
this
number.
is not that's a big number, Trip. Okay. That's a big number. So this is not small. And Turning Point USA has two other organizations underneath of them. They have Turning Point Action. That's their political arm. That's their 501c4. So they're very actively involved in shaping politics. And they also have a faith wing called Turning Point Faith. And this is targeting mainly white evangelical spaces with the mantra of, hey, the church should never have shut down during COVID. And we need a strong church to take back America. We don't need weak pastors. We need strong pastors who are going to stand up for our God-given rights and essentially to save the country. America Fest is Turning Point's Super Bowl. It happens once a year. It attracts 10,000 plus people. The event takes place in the Phoenix Convention Center, and it's a who's who of political, far-right commentators, media organizations, etc. So people like Donald Trump Jr. are going to speak here. If you're following politics, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's the GOP presidential candidate currently running for president right now, alongside folks like Nikki Haley and Chris Christie. If you know who Breitbart News is, you have people like Steve Bannon who speak here. Candace Owens will speak. Ali Stuckey will speak. Eric Metaxas, our good friend, Trip, he's a speaker here. So they have, over the course of 4 days, about 30 different speakers on the main stage. And then they have a whole sponsor area. They have a whole media area where people are live streaming and podcasting 24/7. So it really is a beehive. And it's what I call the largest Christian nationalist gathering in the U.S. And I went there for the second time this year in December. It took place in Phoenix, like I said. So I went and I'll do a video on it. I'm not sure when you're going to drop this, but I'm doing a full recap video on YouTube that should be out this Friday, right before the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you give us some kind of stats for both, like what's going on at this event and the people and platforms that are there? Because this is when, you'll send me these videos, and I'm just like, yeah, well, who takes this seriously, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, that's kind of wild. Like, obviously, if they had read Jesus, they wouldn't have been worried about this or whatnot. But when you kind of drew some of the statistical differences of just right, like $80 million for Charlie Kirk's stuff, but then like just the size of the audience, the money behind it, the
Yep.
people being connected, the way they're organizing, how many people are showing up at these events, and all that kind of stuff. Can you kind of like lay it out? Because as someone who their own faith matters deeply to them, its expression and witness in the public square is important. Yeah, there's that frustration that people think so often in America, like Christian in scare quotes is like right-wing Christianity. But when I realized the size, funding, infrastructure for it, I was like, compared to the things that, the magazines that I have sitting over on my, ottoman over there, I was like, oh,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is where it gets very interesting. So I just described Turning Point USA. And underneath of Turning Point USA, they have tons of what they call contributors. These are people who might be influencers in social media with hundreds of thousands of followers. So they're all kind of networked together, pushing out the same talking points, mainly around culture war issues. And I should also just say to your audience, some of the stuff being pushed at places like America Fest and by Charlie Kirk, again, that's the founder of Turning Point, is literally KKK talking points. Okay. And what I mean by that is I heard from the stage, there's actually clips of this, of them talking about the Great Replacement theory. This is a theory that says there's a deep state or like a deep, dark money funded effort to replace the American demographic with really, third world brown people is what they're going to say, or they'll use the term immigrants. So this is being espoused in places like Turning Point. It's racist in ideology. David Duke, a former KKK Grand Wizard who also ran for office many times, celebrated Tucker Carlson for talking about it on his TV show in 2021. So I just want the audience to know, like, this is not about just being conservative. My concern is not that, someone's like, hey, I'm more pro-life than you are. No. This is like some of the stuff being espoused here is literally straight out of like the racist white supremacy playbook. Okay. So you have Turning Point USA. And then I want to also bring up to your audience 3 other organizations that are important to know of. There's the Daily Wire, that's Ben Shapiro's outlet. Okay. There's PragerU, that's a big quote unquote educational outlet where they're focused on doing free YouTube content, educational content to help people understand, about the true history of America, et cetera. And then there's The Blaze. That used to be owned by Glenn Beck.
Yeah.
He's probably the biggest name folks recognize. And here's just some of the numbers between just these 4 organizations. Okay. What I did was I looked at all of their social media followings and I looked at their actual money raised in the past year or so. So the Daily Wire, again, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, they do about $150 million in operating revenue, and they have 13.9 million followers across all of their channels. And this is not including the individual accounts of Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. This is just the organizational accounts. PragerU, they do $65 million in funding last year, and they have 10.5 million followers across all of their channel. I should also note that PragerU claims, according to their end of year recap, that 4 million people see their content a day, and 70% of people that they polled say that their content has changed their mind on an issue. Now, this is the same group who has videos about Christopher Columbus downplaying the problem of slavery to children in a cartoon. I'm not exaggerating. You go to my Instagram, I already covered it, all right? So that's that. Then you have The Blaze. They do $45 million a year, or last year, I should say. They have 6.5 million followers. And then, of course, Turning Point USA, with their number, $80 million last year alone, 5.8 million followers. So I really want your audience to understand that even if you don't know who these people are, a lot of people do, and their videos do millions of views. They consistently disseminate these very culture war-esque talking points. The gays are ruining America. Immigration's, taking over the country. We have to defend Western civilization. We have to teach kids true history, etc. That's the number. So if you add up all of those numbers, which I've done, you have $315 million a year in funding between these 4 organizations. They have 23.3 million followers across all of their social media accounts. I wish I could tell you, but there's good news, but there really isn't. Because when I was doing this work, as I was kind of doing the research, I thought, okay, so who is out there who's kind of engaging this world of politics, theology, and culture? Because these organizations kind of intersect there. They're talking about politics, they're talking about theology of some sort, and then of course they're talking about culture. So I had to go pretty wide for my who's on the other side of this. And so I pulled about 7 or 8 different organizations. Some of your audience might know, maybe some of your audience don't know. I pulled Relevant Magazine stats. I pulled Christianity Today stats, which is hardly left-wing in any way, shape, or form. I pulled Sojourner stats. I pulled our stats as the New Evangelicals, as we're a nonprofit organization. I pulled Patheos. I pulled Christian Century, and I pulled Faith and Public Life. If you add up all of those, which is like double the amount, you're looking at about $35 million in funding with 2.6 million followers combined across all of their social media channels. But it actually gets even worse. I hate to give the bad news, but here's the reality. Organizations like Christian Century, Faith and Public Life, Christianity Today, I know they are doing good work. This is not me disparaging them, but it's very evident by looking at their social media channels that they're not a social media driven organization. Like that is not their focus. And it shows because they get no traction whenever they post. I mean, we have less YouTube subscribers than Christianity Today does, but we do triple the views because we're way more engaged there, right? And my concern in the liberal Protestant world, broadly speaking, I'm sure there are some people doing this, is that I feel like they're not aware of how people are so online and digital driven, and their content isn't there. So you have this one side that is so massively funded that knows how to work social media, that knows how to go viral in all the right ways, that's disseminating really dangerous and harmful rhetoric that hurts queer people, hurts BIPOC folks, hurts women. And then the response to that are groups who are like, well, yeah, we're more about, our magazine, or we're more about maybe doing stuff, on our website. And listen, that's fine, but you're not going to make a serious dent in this world if you think that, social media is not the place to push your content. So it's very discouraging, honestly.
Yeah. Well, like when you add up the comparisons, right? So if Christianity today is included in the not cray cray side,
Right.
right? Um, then what's like the difference in numbers and funding look like? Like 10 to
It's,
1, 100 to
yeah,
1?
it's about 10%. It's about 10%.
Oh,
So, like, you're looking at $35 million in funding with all those other organizations, the relevant Christianity Sojourners, and $315 million between four groups, not seven or eight. And by the way, us, just so the audience knows, as a nonprofit, we are by far the smallest. So we did this year, we raised about $180,000 in donations. Yet, we have one of the largest social media followings, and our videos consistently way outperform even who's second. Like, for example, again, just giving your audience the background here. I looked at Instagram engagement across all platforms. And Christianity Today, their last 10 videos that they posted on what do you call it? On Instagram, they did about, let's see, 498,000 views combined. Ours, which is, again, we have literally in 5% of the funding. Christianity Today's does $11 million a year. We did $180,000 this year. We have 1.5 million views across our last 10 videos. So again, just goes to show that it's not even so much a money thing. It's what you're focused on, and also how you can actually move content. So it's just very interesting to see that even though we're one of the newest organizations in this world, the content that we're doing is already making a bigger impact in the digital media space than legacy organizations that have been here for a long time.
mhm. Now, as someone who kind of back end to doing this, right? Like you got in
Yeah.
trouble at the church you were playing drums at. They were like, "What's up with you having this Instagram account and thinking evangelicalism shouldn't be the handmaiding of Donald Trump and all lives matter and whatever the stuff that was like ethically disturbing for certain part of evangelicalism."
Yeah.
And so you have this platform and it grows and you develop the nonprofit and stuff. In that process of learning, kind of like on the fly of how to
Mm.
watch, engage, and shape the online conversation, like what do you wish more progressive Christians knew? Right, like because you came out of a world going, we already know how to use these things, and now look what we're using them for, and you're like, WTF? Start the new evangelicals. Um, if you were like sitting down with the board of people, I don't know, they were like, what if you love Jesus and immigrants and don't want LGBTQ people feeling the need to self-harm, etc., like care for the planet, basic things. What do you wish if you had them all in the room, that you could like tell them, here's what I learned seeing how the tribe I left behind did it. Like
Yeah.
what are those kind of like observations? Because in my experience, um, like more progressive you are, the less likely you are to want to tend to it or be aware of it, and that kind of thing. And I just think some of the lack is just lack of information, and other of the reasons you see such a hesitation is a kind of, I don't know, self-righteousness of not even wanting to engage in how these algorithms and platforms work.
Yeah. Well, first off, I will say it's a huge learning curve. I mean, making content consistently, as you know, Triv, it could be a full-time job alone, just making your edits and making it work a certain way. Of course, you have things like what they call the algorithm, right? How do you get people to actually view your content? So I'm not going to lie, it's a major learning curve. I mean, I'm still learning so much. I'm still trying to shape my videos to be engaging. But I would tell people, if I was in front of like some of these organizations, I would say, listen, you need to realize two or three things. First off, you need to realize that whether you like it or not, narrative is shaped digitally. It's shaped digitally. Like, if you want to shape narratives about what it means to be a Christian, you got to do it digitally. That's what these other groups are doing, and they're really effective. I mean, again, we know, Trip, that when we say to people who don't know anything about this, I'm a Christian, we know what they're filling in the blanks with. They're not thinking about, oh, so you're inclusive and want to, welcome the immigrants. Like, oh, so you like Donald Trump and you're homophobic. It's like, well, why is that? Why did the first thing that comes into their head? Because these groups have done a really good job dominating the social and digital media landscape of YouTube, etc. But number two, I would say there are so many people who are so hungry for a better way forward in their faith. I mean, the statistic is 45 million people have left the church in the past 20 years, broadly speaking. That's every denomination, that's every flavor. And we can see trends recently of it really exploding inside of more evangelical spaces. The SBC, Southern Baptist Convention, had a record loss last year. And that's not because necessarily people are deconverting. I mean, some are deconverting, some are leaving the house of Christian thought entirely, and we wish them well on their journey, of course. But there are a lot of people, and I would know because I get thousands of DMs a month sometimes, people saying, I wish I knew about this version of Christianity 5 years ago, or hey, is there anyone out there as a Christian who is inclusive and doesn't think that if I'm gay, I'm going to burn in hell forever? There are so many people out there who are so hungry for that better way forward in their faith that isn't rooted in nationalism or supremacy or Trumpism, but that really believes that God loves all of our neighbors and wants to see all of their human flourishing and takes their faith very seriously. So I think that in my mind, like the more liberal Protestant traditions have so much to offer to a very thirsty group of people who are like, I know there's got to be a better way forward than whatever I just knew about, but I don't even know where to start. And unfortunately, whether people like it or not, people look online first. People do not look, especially people who are newly quote unquote deconstructing or who have experienced church trauma. They're not going to go back to a church, at least right away. The last thing they're going to do is go to a mainline liturgical based, Episcopalian church, just so that way they can hear the good news of Jesus welcoming all the immigrants.
I
They're
don't
going to
know.
go online.
I don't know why. What I do is I just get my new subscription to Christian Century.
There you go. Yeah. Well, not everyone thinks like you do, Trip. I mean, you're head and shoulders above us in that sense, right? But for real, people go to digital, they go to TikTok, they go to YouTube, they go to Instagram. So I just really can't overemphasize that, like, there's a huge need. There are people desperate for a better way forward. There's a culture that wants Christians to do better, and there's all these different avenues to do it. But we have to put the money and time and learn a new skill. We have to learn something new, and last thing I'll say to your point, because you mentioned there is maybe in the spaces you occupy a little sense of self-righteousness. What does it mean to love God and love our neighbor in 2022? Now, 2023, going into 2024. How do we love all of our neighbors? So we know that there was a record amount of anti-trans legislation submitted throughout all 50 states, thanks to Christian nationalism. What does it look like to love our neighbor when we see the borderline draconian abortion laws being passed in places like Texas, where a woman whose fetus was tragically diagnosed with trisomy 18, which is a lethal condition, couldn't even get an abortion. And when she tried to, the Supreme Court overruled her in Texas. She had to go out of state, right? So, like, what does it mean to love our neighbor? So we have to kind of get beyond our little bubbles sometimes. I tell evangelicals this often, so I'll tell your liberal friends this often. Get out of your bubble, and start engaging culture and give them some freaking good news. It's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that for me, one of the I don't know, provocations of sorts, as you kind of kept sharing at what's going on, is this sense that I can't remember how you said it, but it was something like, I didn't even know there was another version of Christianity like this 4 years ago. Why should more people see my YouTube video or my Instagram thing when there's like a whole giant part of the church I didn't even know existed?
Right.
And I had to be like thrown out in order to find it. They couldn't
Mhm.
y'all do a little bit better job at being found?
Right.
and and so
Right.
I think that's the kind of spirit I think that it's needed to hear this. And and you're right. Like, there used to be a whole different way people kind of transitioned in faith. The role of personal interaction and physical space was different, and the role of very different mediums are there. But now, the kind of algorithmic siloing, all that kind of stuff, and like even the way particular topics get framed in silos like sets up for a kind of either you're like in the whirlpool of that ideology and getting faster and faster and don't know it, but the moment you start to slow down or go like, should we be doing this, you're just going to get trampled or thrown out, right? and
Right.
and
Right.
and it's like in that space for those that have given themselves and are deeply animated by a different vision of the faith, do you actually want to engage and talk about them, or do you just want to lament the fact that they didn't know the UCC church existed down the street and that they should come, be the only ones with kids and be bored? Like
Well,
there's
that's
this,
exactly right.
yeah,
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, a lot of this is, I mean, I tell people often, a lot of us grew up in the basement of Christianity. It's like, oh, there's this dark, moldy basement of fundamentalism. And we were taught on the inside that above ground is just a desert wasteland. Like there is no other Christianity, right? And then you finally get so desperate, or you get forced out, where you're forced up the stairs, to walk out your religious debt. And you go, oh, wait, there's actually a house. I'm actually on top of a huge house of this Christian thought that is huge. I mean, it's massive, thousands of rooms and ways of expressing the Christian tradition. And so it's like, I totally get for people like me, where it's like, I get mad at my tradition for sheltering me so much and telling me that, well, if you believe that eternal conscious torment is not forever, you can't be a real Christian. Like, thanks, Francis Chan, like, okay. But at the same time, I will tell you, as someone who has been alive for most of his adult life, I can't think of any time I've come across some kind of like video of like a Pete Enns or whoever saying, hey, let's take a deeper look at the Bible, or here's why this thing can be seen differently. So what I think about, it's funny, Trip, like in a lot of ways, this is kind of an evangelical idea. It's like, hey, let's utilize culture. Let's utilize social media and technology to disseminate our information. That's very evangelical. But I'm proposing that we actually give a much better message than the one that conservative evangelicalism historically has given people through those mediums, right? So you think about like Jerry Falwell and the Moral Majority, how they really utilize radio and TV to push harmful, homophobic, vile rhetoric, that the gays are coming for your kids. But the idea of using the latest and greatest technology, so to speak, to disseminate information is actually quite brilliant. That's why in so many ways they won the culture war in that sense at the time. So I'm like, well, why don't we just take that strategy and put some healthy, good fuel in that and see what we can get out of it,
yeah, yeah. So, you went to America Fest.
Yeah.
I want to hear a few stories to give people an idea of just what the 300 and some $1 million industry is obsessed with.
Okay.
So I mean, I know you've been working on a way of like sharing it and things. So give us a few of the highlights. You know what highlights means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah. I've been able to really network inside these spaces. People know who I am at these events. Turning Point knows who I am. They allow me to come because I'm a good faith actor. I tell them all the time, like, listen, yes, I'm going to do a recap video. Yes, I disagree strongly, but I'm not here to spread misinformation about you, So I go and I talk to a lot of people. One story that sticks out, I think this will really, hopefully, jar your audience a little bit and kind of demonstrate just the dissonance that exists in these spaces. Because on one hand, it very much is a pro-Trump, rah, 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 save America thing, but it is strongly rooted in some kind of faith tradition of the Christian conservative evangelical flavor. You might, as your audience is listening, think, well, how can you reconcile the Jesus of the Sermon on the Mount with, the Jesus of Trump that essentially bows down to Satan and says, yes, I want power over the nation. So let me kiss the ring,
Good question.
It's a very, very different thing. But this is just how it functions. So on Sunday afternoon, I'm in the general session. I'm watching Steve Bannon speak. I'm not going to go into details on Steve Bannon, but he's a very problematic person for a lot of reasons, very tied into the global Christian nationalist movement that's rooted in authoritarianism, etc. He is ranting and raving. I mean, he's saying things to the audience like, if anyone lays a finger on Trump, we're going to come after you. He accuses the Washington Post of publishing an article that calls for Trump's assassination. I read the article. No such claim was made. So he calls Nikki Haley, who's a current presidential candidate for the GOP right now as well, he says she's more ambitious. No, she's ambitious as Lucifer, is what he says. Okay. He says it literally. I wish I can give you the clip. You can put it in the podcast if you
Oh,
want. She's ambitious as Lucifer. The
phew.
crowd cheers. She would be worse in the Oval Office than Judas Pence, meaning Mike Pence, because remember, Mike Pence betrayed the country for not going along with Trump's
Yeah.
assault election scheme. So this is the whole rant. Now, at one point, someone yells out something in the crowd, and what I heard talking about Nikki Haley, I heard the words "fuck her," and then the crowd starts chanting what I thought was "fuck her," and they're yelling "F her, F her," and Steve Bannon holds the mic out to the crowd, and at the end of the rant goes, "This is not a PG crowd." So I really thought that's what they were yelling, and so did Steve Bannon, by the way. I know that for a fact. I talked to Turning Point Actor about this. So it turns out they were yelling Tucker Carlson, because they want Tucker as VP. But regardless, Steve Bannon still thought they were yelling "ever." I'm mortified in the room. He's celebrating it. Now, Trip, I want your audience to brace themselves. This is where things
Okay,
get.
which is worse though? Tucker Carlson as VP
Yeah.
or just cursing about a presidential candidate that's not going to win?
We really could go either way. We really could go either way on that. I mean, we could have a long debate on the ethics of either of those statements.
Could you just
right?
imagine the
Jeez
vice
Louise,
presidential
no.
debate of Tucker Carlson
No.
and Kamala Harris? Like he
No.
would do his little laugh, which I
Yeah.
only know because the algorithm, since being your friend, randomly sends me montages of Tucker Carlson.
Yes, which he did. I watched him live. He did the laugh. He accused, again, even from the stage when he was talking, quick side note, he reiterated the great replacement theory that, we're being washed out by immigrants. I mean, this is just what it is, So it's amazing to see, again, a very Christian crowd. And here's why I say Christian. After Steve Bannon calls Nikki Haley Lucifer and demons, and mistakes a crowd chanting "F her" for Tucker, 20 minutes after he gets off the stage turns around to bring on a worship band where they sang songs to Jesus. I swear to God. And that kicked off the Strong Church Worship Night, which then brought on Charlie Kirk to preach a
Strong
message.
Church Worship Night?
Strong Church Worship Night, where then Charlie Kirk got on the stage, the founder of Turning Point. He preached a message. Eric Metaxas got on stage. Now, again, I need to tell you, I'm not exaggerating. Eric Metaxas wrote a book. I have the book. I read the book. It's called A Letter to the American Church. In the book, to give you an idea of the rhetoric we're dealing with, Eric Metaxas says in his book that the pastors who hung Nazi flags in Germany can be compared to the pastors today who hang Black Lives Matter and Pride flags in their churches. That is, I can pull the quote if you want it. It's a real thing. That man takes the stage after a worship team just leads worship for people praising a Jesus, to use your language, Trip, who bore a cross for his enemies, after hearing a rah-rah-rah speech about how Christian nationalism wants to build crosses for theirs.
Yeah.
No cognitive dissonance. It's like, worthy is the lamb that was slain. We love you, God. 10 minutes earlier, Nikki Haley's as ambitious as Lucifer. It's like, what are we doing here? So this is the kind of whiplash that you really experience in these spaces. And then when you end up talking to some of these folks who are not on the stage, they're polite and they're nice and they're people. They're not Christian nationalist robots. And you're like, how do you do this? How do you sit in a space where you're like, as good God-fearing Christians standing on biblical values, Trump's our guy and this event represents American values, and then you hear the rhetoric of Steve Bannon or Vivek Ramaswamy on the stage, again, the presidential candidate who tells, was it Van Jones from CNN, just shut the fuck up, is what he says from the stage. And the crowd breaks out in applause. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? So that's just a taste of what it's like being at this event.
Well, so it wasn't that similar to Theology Beer Camp, is what you're saying.
It was slightly
It was
different.
slightly different. They didn't have free beer everywhere.
No, they definitely did not, actually.
And Flamey Grant didn't do the worship, I'm guessing.
No.
No? All right. That's good. That's
Nope.
good. I'm glad it wasn't that similar.
Just to be clear.
When you think of I mean, I've heard you talk about this, I don't know, like kind of contrast of like what happens in the performance space there, and then like your interactions with a lot of the individuals.
Yeah.
Um, and you've even had conversations on the T&E podcast with people that, are there and they're uncomfortable with a lot of the same things you are.
Hmm.
Uh, be it like the most hyperbolic part of the rhetoric. Well, at least we hope it's just hyperbole,
Right.
and such. What do you think people that aren't friends or exist in those spaces where you get some of the more personal interactions? What do you think we don't understand about the faith that is animating people? Not the crazy ones that will just say it, but the ones that will chant or the ones that will tolerate it to be there because there's something about their faith that says that I have an identity with what Charlie Kirk and company are doing, even though, Steve Bannon or Ramaswamy or whoever might say something and go too far. But this is my tribe and I'm spending money and time and being here. Like, what are
Yeah.
those people who in convos are nice and even share some of your hesitations? Like, what makes their attachment? Are there particular issues or anxieties or framings you think that they go, well, I'm still keeping one foot here in this tribe?
This is the part of the Rubik's cube that I just have a hard time solving still because I'm curious myself. I wonder, just emphasize for your audience. I grew up in an evangelical space that gave me like very strong convictions on integrity and sexual ethics, and so I couldn't reconcile in 2016 how my own faith tradition that taught me that the true biblical marriage is one man, one woman for life, and any man who can't do that maybe shouldn't be fit to lead the country. Hello, Franklin Graham. Now just turn around and be like, oh, well, who cares that Trump is, assaulting women and on his third marriage and sleeps with porn stars? We want a commander in chief, not a pastor in chief, right? So like I've asked this question to people who are very close to big names in this space. I don't drop names here because these are confidential conversations. I have the trust of these people. I'm not here to betray it. But I will tell you one story. Last year, I asked a pastor who's pretty well known in the space. We had a good conversation. I said, Pastor so-and-so, help me understand. Like, I really want to know. You're reading the Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, etc. And my concern at these events is the level of dehumanization we're seeing towards political opponents, right? And he, I kid you not, went on this little like rehearsed speech about why Trump is, he fits the seven mountain mandate, which is, this idea that there are seven mountains of influence and how Trump was a good business leader and he, did really well in the business sector and how he's draining the swamp. And I'm just like, that's not really an answer. I'm very much still unpersuaded by the responses. I've asked this to many people. I think that some of the concerns that people have in this space, for right or for wrong, let's just say what I think that they are. I think a lot of them have a major concern around the quote unquote trans movement. They're worried about the grooming of children at places like Drag Queen Story Hour in schools. And again, I know what your audience is thinking. Just look at the evangelical church if you want examples of actual grooming. I know, but for them, this is like the biggest issue ever. There's a thought that we're losing the country to deep forces. A lot of this, and I'm saying this in a recap video, a lot of the language, it seems like it's intentionally broad. Like, who is the deep state exactly? Who is this secret cabal that's threatening America? Where is this deep-seated evil that is going to ruin the country? Like who is it the drag queen at Drag Queen Story Hour? Like, is that the deep state operative here? There's a lot of talk around the election being stolen. They still believe that Trump had the presidency stolen from him. He needs to come back. I also want to point out to your audience that in some ways this event's kind of diverse. Meaning, if you start with Mitt Romney is a rhino, he's a terrible conservative, and go farther right, you're going to find your people. So some people are like, yeah, Mitt Romney isn't great, but maybe Nikki Haley's slightly better. Then from there, you just go further right to Nikki Haley is Lucifer, the election's stolen, or like this pamphlet says, what really happened at 9/11, which I got this pamphlet at this event too.
Oh, you don't got to explain to
Literally,
liberal Protestants our 9/11 conspiracy theory. That was
yeah,
when that
okay.
was like
Well, that was there.
I got plenty of inside job. Like if the moment the Supreme Court gave an election to George W. Bush, the progressive types were ready for, you know,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
and the best part about it is, like, the, I mean, like, the role what was the name of that the movie on YouTube? Second Change, Second you know, the 9/11 conspiracy video that blew up on YouTube?
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, but I had vague, familiarity with it.
Yeah, that was, like, the first time I remember thinking, "Wow, the internet can do some things." You know? It was not
Yeah.
like there was no, like, mainstream press that was, talking about a 9/11 conspiracy, and then all of a sudden, I was a campus minister during div school, um, a bunch of students had all watched Second Change, Loose Change, something whatever it was, and I watched it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is interesting,"
Right.
and I think that that kind of, siloing of what media you even would take seriously and such, the younger you are, the so post-mainstream media you are, the way authority works, the way you decide to trust
Totally.
things, the way you get algorithmically located, all these kinds of things are, like, increasingly intense, and, it's just hard if you're the older you are to go like, "You trust some random YouTube show?" Like, that just that and I experienced this I mean, I've been on stages where, it's big liberal Protestant things, a couple of years ago, the year before lockdown, I'm speaking at this big event of mostly liberal Protestant ministers, right? So, uh, and in that day's main stage things, was Walter Brueggemann and
Hmm.
Catherine Keller, which if you're gone to divinity school and are a liberal Protestant, you probably read at least two of their books, and everyone knows who they are. And then me. Now a third of the room listens to the podcast, Gen X and under, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, trip, blah 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 blah." After it, Walter Brueggemann comes up to me and he goes, because Catherine had been on the podcast enough, she said something, but he's like, "I, I, how do all these people know who you are?" And he's probably the most assigned Bible person, right, for mainline Protestants. Um,
Right.
and we've done plenty of stuff together, but it was just like it was one of these moments where, like half the room who's never touched the internet,
Yeah.
are like, "Why is this young whippersnapper, on stage with like legit superstars in our world?" And then when
Right.
there were like a whole group of people who are like, "I listen to him every week, and I love when Walter or Catherine's on his podcast and blah blah blah." And no wonder he's hosting the interaction thing at late night with them, or the it was one of those moments where I'm like, there is this whole other world, and the
Yeah.
gatekeepers for older institutions, be it political parties, denominations, or even like media institutions that succeeded and have sustainability, right? Like on an old medium or old kind of mechanisms. Well, it's real hard to pivot. We've seen CNN and Fox all try different streaming things.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not even like really a criticism of people that have a sustainable model for doing what they do. It's
Right.
just there are like giant networks of content creation that are connected to how people understand their identity and reflect and wrestle with questions and such that, aren't getting the attention and creative energy of
Yeah.
the part of the church that is most needed in the public square currently. Right? That
Uh,
to me is the thing.
Totally.
And if if you took that moment of Walter looking at me like, where did all these people figure out who you are? Or like when my first book came out, um, it was the same. I was signing books with Jürgen Moltmann in another line, and his had a long line of older people sitting in line to sign his book, and I had a big circle of graduate students signing my book, but mostly just telling religious jokes with inappropriate humor and telling them where to come meet me to drink that night. Right. Like, and after it, Moltmann's like, "I don't even know who you are." And I was like, "I've read everything you wrote, and there's a chapter
Mm.
about you in this book, and I can't believe we're at the same line." Right. So
Yes.
like,
Yes. Yes.
and so often the authority people are like, "Well, why the hell does he get this platform, or why does he do this?" And I think one of the reasons I think we became friends and really, have connected is both of us sit there and go like, "Well, someone needs to do it, and I would
Exactly.
love to help give better platforms, energy, techniques, and stuff to people that are specialists in areas or better communicators in areas. But I mean, for 15 years, the podcast has been I will read books normal people don't read, and then talk to the scholars long enough so that then the average person without a graduate degree, if they care about the topic or whatever, can hear a conversation with someone that did put the effort to read and understand and has the degrees with the specialist in it. So maybe they can think with these ideas, because we're so bad at getting our best ideas to the populace.
Right.
And I think in the same way, like for me, the gap between the church and the academy was big, and that's been my kind of, vocational energy. There's a similar gap between what comes out, these beautiful ethical statements from like the National Council of Churches or the different like mainline Protestants and all these kinds of things, and then what gets communicated in the public square, right? So one of the reasons asking about America Fest and excited about your new project Amplify is I hope um, like 2 years from now, the there's 20% of the energy, following, and funding differential, not just
Yeah.
10% when you think of like those big groups.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that is why as an organization, we're launching this campaign we call Project Amplify, frankly, because I realized that, also podcasting, not nearly as long as you, about 3 years now for TNE, I've talked to so many amazing and brilliant people in all disciplines, right? Political and trauma informed and Bible nerds. I'm like, why do people not know who you are? Or what if like you went viral on the internet with like some of your perspectives that are so brilliant? And I realized that content creation is a full-time job, and so is being a Bible nerd. And it's not fair for me to assume that Bible nerds know how to work social media to their advantage, right? So and that's just like how you would never want me to write a book about the Bible. Like that's just not my thing. I'm not trained enough to be seen as someone who could write authoritatively on such a subject. So I talked to my team, albeit it's a small team, but I talked to my board. I said, listen, we're going into an election year. Christian nationalism is gaining momentum, even though numerically it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's still very powerfully funded and it can shape elections. It is getting picked up in like the mainstream news sometimes, which is really good. It's a great start. But what if we were able to merge our expertise of being content creators with the expertise of other credible contributors to help amplify their expertise and help shape it for a digital media world? Because one of the tricky parts, right? I think this is maybe one of the biggest obstacles to overcome. Social media, especially things like Instagram and TikTok, right? They're designed for short form, meaning when you're scrolling through reel after reel on Instagram, they say you have about 3 seconds to hook your viewer. Well, to get a Bible scholar to talk about something deep in under a minute is really challenging because, to their point, it's complicated, right? Like if I said, hey,
Yes.
give me a 60-second overview on how we got our Bible, you'd be like, 60 seconds, are you mad? Like I can get 1/4 of my thesis out in a 60-second
No, I'll
clip,
just
right?
say it's triggering. I've gotten
It's
text
just,
messages from you, or you're like little audio message, and you're like, could you just quickly say? And I just think to myself, quickly, quickly. What do you? I half my episodes are 2 hours long.
right.
What do you mean quickly?
Right. And when you're dealing in propaganda and rhetoric, you can just say things, right? The election was stolen. Fight for our country. Subscribe here. Okay, I'm in. Who needs qualifications? So I certainly understand the challenges of this, but I know with the right people helping the right contributors, we can hopefully create a coalition. Because I'll tell you, Trip, another big strength of this other space is that they all cross-pollinate. You're going to find Charlie Kirk on Ben Shapiro stuff, and Ben Shapiro will be on Charlie Kirk stuff. And, Ali Stuckey speaks at America Fest, even though she works for The Blaze. They're not in competition. They're like, no, we're on the same team. We have a message to disseminate. We have rhetoric to espouse, and we're unified. And I don't always see that same level of unification or even cross-pollination in some of these more progressive spaces that I found recently. I'm like, you know what, guys? We can argue over the nitty-gritty. later on. But right now, like, democracy truly is on the brink of collapse in America. And I sincerely believe that. I don't mean that hyperbolically. Just look at how Trump is tweeting and what he's saying and what he wants to do. Look up Project 2025. If you don't believe me, we have bigger fish to fry. And so that's where we're at. So, we're a small nonprofit. We're currently in the campaigning phase, trying to raise the money needed because obviously we don't have $80 million. We're trying to raise about $1 million this year just to even be able to hire the right people, to build out the structure, to have a more consistent platform that is really engaged with politics, culture, and theology, but working with contributors from disciplines that are credible and, knowledgeable and want to give the complexity and want to give a better way forward. So that's kind of the goal long term.
Yeah. Okay, so in the homebrewed member group, when I was saying I was going to talk to you, and that you'd gone to America Fest, I was like, what should I ask about thinking? He might give an explanation for those of us that don't hang out in that circle. Though I have to admit, I had thought it would be fun to go with a video crew and interview people there, but do it in character, Tim. I would like to go like Borat at America Fest, but wear a seersucker suit and use a Southern accent the whole time, and just come across as like someone that's significantly more biblical than them, and see what happens. Like, because the kinds of responses that I guess I watched one of your things and then other people's videos from there came up. And this is what the internet does. They had like 3 days of just horrendous short videos from clergy. I'm just can't wait to get home and like seize my authority as a minister to take a biblical stand for democracy. And I thought, whoa, great, we support democracy. This is excellent. And then what do you think the next 30 seconds of that video was?
Trump?
Yeah, that we don't have a democracy.
Right.
And it's been stolen from us. And if we don't, we don't. And there's one guy's like, we might even need to do mail-in balloting for our homebound members. And I'm like, why? What's the deal with with mail-in balloting? Well, then you go looking in the comments and stuff, and then there are people like, you can't trust mail-in balloting.
Oh yeah, dude.
And it went in this whole thing, and I'm like, oh wow, this is wild. Okay, so here are the 3 topics, and that came up, and like thinking of your experience there and such, and your interaction in that community. One of them was, what is the conversation around abortion, pro-life, and such in that group when you've had overturning of Roe v. Wade, the return to the states, the kind of pushback at state level, where different states are like, no, we're going to add a constitutional amendment to say, protect women's rights here, or being voted down on some of the, more, 6-week bans or whatever. Like when you are in the space that is that intentionally right wing, working up identity politics issues and culture war stuff, and it's post the overturning of Roe v. Wade. How does that conversation different?
Well, I mean, it's a celebratory thing. In this space, abortion is murdering a child. That's what it is. And no ands, ifs, or buts. You have groups like the White Rose who were there. They're a big, what's called abolition group. So there's this movement inside the pro-life movement called abolitionism, which thinks that the pro-life movement is too moderate and it's too bought off by like big money. So these are people who would advocate for punishing women who get abortions. They would say, if you get an abortion, you've murdered your child, you're a murderer, and the law of homicide should apply to you. And same thing goes for the doctors. This is, I'm not being hyperbolic. Look up Jeff Durbin if you don't believe me. Like, this is real stuff. I don't make this shit up. So in this space, it's definitely a very strong emphasis on Roe v. Wade was a win from God. Trump gave us Roe v. Wade being overturned. But there's more work to do. We have to go after the state's issues now. There is I wouldn't say every person subscribes to this, but there's definitely a good chunk of people who are like, birth control's next. Let's go after birth control. 100%. So it's celebratory with with the perspective that abortion is absolutely murder. You're murdering a child. Like literally, if you got an abortion at week 4, it's equivalent to me murdering my 3-year-old.
Huh, there you go. Okay, so the second one was, well, how did the trans issue become so big? Now, um, I, like in what was its role in animating? Like in the group discussion, some people had said it seemed like after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, because there's a whole chunk of more conservative, especially women, who are like, well, there's one thing, to eliminate third trimester abortions when there's viability or whatever. It's another to like make someone whose baby's going to die and they may not be able to have children go to another state, right?
Right.
That's not there, but the kind of blowing up of just big fear around trans individuals. What what like in that space? What role does it play? Because on the outside, especially in more, I think, more progressive circles, you just go, of all the issues to, have fear and such around, it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't compute when you consider how few individuals would even fit in the category, and
Yep.
and then when you look at the data, like this is something I know like you're more likely to be sexually assaulted at uh by a family member or at a church thing, than by a trans person in a bathroom. There's just like,
hmm
what role did you see it playing, and how is it being framed in that space?
Well, keep in mind, this is a long legacy of like the moral majority kind of tactics. Like there's always a new other to be afraid of. Right. It was the satanic panic in the 80s. It was, secular music in the 90s, I think, the liberals at some point, then the gays, right? If we allow gay marriage, it will destroy America. Then we had the critical race theory panic. Like there's always another panic, always to be afraid of. The reason why, in my opinion, I can't say I have a hard evidence for this, but I would say that the reason why we have a trans panic in America by this group is for 2 reasons. Number one, they know they lost the war on gay and, bisexual and lesbian folks. They know that they completely lost the culture war there. Don't forget, I mean, we can pull up videos from like Jerry Falwell, and even before that in the 70s, videos of like so and so is a gay man, and there's a video of them in the bathroom. It's like, okay, it's the same kind of rhetoric, right? So like this bathroom stuff, it is such an old, straight out of the playbook of like fear-based politics. Because you're right, Trip. I mean, statistically, I'm looking it up now, according to the Williams Institute, 1.6 million adults age 18 and older and youth identify as trans in the US, or point, like it's like 1.6% of the population. Like it's a very small group of people, tiny, tiny group. And you would think, based on the incessant obsession by the Matt Walshes and right wing media, that like they're 90% of the population and they're like holding kids hostage and trying to make kids like trans or something. But they're not. Like that's not how this works. And I think the reason why it works is because it's foreign to the average, first off, I think just person in society. Like trans people are not very common. I think some people, because maybe they're not trans, have a hard time understanding how that might look for someone, right? These are all valid things. I mean, it's a foreign concept to me as a hetero, heterosexual, cisgender man, right? Like, I get that. So you already have that kind of working against you in that sense. And then you have the religious aspect, right? You have this, well, here's our Bible verses that prove being trans is sin. And so this must be some kind of satanic agenda trying to make our kids trans. And then you have anything that is seen in the media, any representation of people who are not the normative, evangelical family is seen as an attack on the family, right? So if an episode of Bluey, which I don't even know if this is true, had a gay character on it, or even a trans character, oh, they're indoctrinating the children. Oh my God, they're trying to turn our kids trans, or only because
Yeah.
there was representation of other people who are not like them in the media. So I
Tim,
think all these things work
blueies are
together.
dogs, so
Right.
is that like covert furry recruitment?
I mean, it's only a matter of time before that gets picked up, right? That becomes the new thing. I mean, I mean that sincerely. Like in 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about something else. There's going to be another thing that is out there that is, is destroying America imminently. And then what they do is they tie it back to the same buzzwords. This is cultural Marxism. This is socialism. This is communism. This is the deep state. So like this is woke. All these things get lumped into this category. So I think my best guess is that this minority group has been an easy target because people fear what they don't understand. And so they've latched onto the fear side and made this a much bigger issue than it actually is.
Yeah. It's is that like when you're in the room at America Fest, um, is I mean, I don't know the nice way of putting it, but if you like when you just even give the percentage of people, right? There's 40 times more people that would identify as communist in America.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
and so the it the amount of fear that's there, when it seems a bit odd, at least from the outside. Like, what how does that get expressed in a room, um like either like on stage or in conversations, when you're hanging out with your own team, right? Does that make sense? Like, when they're in that space, they're not like recruiting. They're
Hmm.
it's like a gathering of like-minded people and such.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it is just about protecting kids. That's the banner. Protect the kids from being groomed. That's what it comes down to. And again, where I get very frustrated is like you, Trip. I'm like, well, let's look at the data then. I mean, the RAIN Institute, which like this is where all the data comes from, will tell you that a child overwhelmingly is more likely to be sexually assaulted by either someone they know in the family or at church or some other relative. And there's just 7% of all sexual abuse cases are happened by strangers. 7%, right? So the idea of a child at drag queen story hour with their parents present getting molested is like ridiculous when you really think about it, right? But then you see story after story about youth pastor so-and-so or John MacArthur or this. And it's like, guys, if you really want to protect kids, like we should be looking at like what's happening in the church, because this seems to be pretty consistently a theme of kids actually getting molested by their youth pastor or by someone that they trust. That seems like a much bigger fish to fry than the 40 parents in one town in one state who brought their kids to drag queen story hour, which you were not forced to attend and don't have to bring your kids to.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that kind of looking at the data thing is it's similarly problematic, right, when you're dealing with abortion, because like
Yeah.
the actual policies that lower the amount of abortion, be it healthcare, education, or support for mothers who choose to have children and all that kind of stuff, like to actually lower the numbers, those kind of policies have not been ones supported by the GOP. So you actually get fewer abortions when more democratic policies are enacted, which I get because they take all as murder or whatever. But if you're also saying like, oh, I'm pro-life and I want this is bad, we should have less of it. We'll engage democracy to lower the number. Or, oh, we want to save children. How would we act in our institutions to do X, Y, and Z? And when your deep values and are then enacted politically, and there's more of the violence you're against, be it against kids or embryos, it's just it's I don't know. The amount of cognitive dissonance there is something I think among progressives you're like regularly going, yeah, but if you're against abortions, there's just less of them if you do this. Or if
Right.
you want to
Right.
protect kids, have you considered the fact that most of even evangelical denominations have resisted the kind of background check requirements that mainline Protestant churches have,
Yep.
and or
Yep.
safe church policies and all these other kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it seem. I'm sure anywhere people can manipulate data. I mean, it's a big issue we have, right? People will cite some random fact without the context. But I did witness a lot of that here. I mean, maybe a more non-charged example would be Charlie Kirk gave his opening speech at America Fest, and he said, for the something to the effect of like young young men, like high schoolers and stuff, are more conservative than ever before. That was what he said. Like statistically, he showed the stat. I was like, interesting. I'm like, well, and I'm thinking like, well, I know Gen Z is more progressive than ever before. So what does this mean? Well, the actual stat is that when they polled high schoolers, out of the ones who said they're already conservative, they were further conservative than before. So it's not that all boys are trending conservative. It's actually quite the opposite. Most trend non-political, just, no, I'm not going to identify it either way. But out of the ones that were conservative, they trended farther conservative, right? So like there's a delta between men are trending more conservative than ever before versus, well, the ones who we polled who already identified as conservative trended more conservative than before. But you wouldn't know the difference because it's presented as one way. Same thing with even with like, well, Democrats just want to kill kids up to the point of birth. But then you look at the statistics and realize that it's like 0.9% of all abortions happen in the third trimester, not even up until the point of birth. And my understanding from all the professionals I talk to is that usually when that happens, something has gone catastrophically, tragically wrong. And that is a necessary step to save life for the mother or something like that. It's not that one day a woman wakes up and goes, after like 30 something weeks, nah, let's go ahead and have the abortion now. Like, that's not how it happens, right? But the rhetoric, the way that you would understand this world to be, you would think that out there are just people who just want to, up to the point of birth, just want to go ahead and abort, their child. And that's just not the case. So you hear a lot of anecdotal evidence trying to back up like this broader claim that, look, trans people are grooming kids, because here's one example of a trans person who was found guilty of assaulting a child, which of course is bad. But we know that statistically, they're not any more or less or more likely. It's just, they're just human, right? So it's things like that that make you just pull your hair out because you're intentionally, it seems like, manipulating data to paint a picture of what is not really happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that definitely happens in
Wait, sorry. Can I give you one more example of this just to really
you can
drive it home for your
well,
audience? Do
the
you mind?
level of smile when that idea came across your face is
Sorry,
persuasive.
just another one because immigration is big here, right? They talk a lot about how we're, Donald Trump said it in his, they're sending their worst, to use other language for it. There's this perception that illegal or undocumented immigrants are making crime go crazy, and Charlie makes this point about Minneapolis, Minnesota, how it used to be good until they brought in these third world immigrants. He turns out he's talking about Muslims, but if you look at the data, Minneapolis doesn't even crack the top 15 most dangerous cities in the US. It's like, dude, what are you actually talking about then? One other point I'll bring up to you too, the Cato Institute did a study and found that per 100,000 people, the most dangerous section of people in the country were native born citizens. They were at 1,400 cases of criminality per 100,000. The least likely were documented immigrants, I think 400 per 100,000. And then undocumented were like 700 per 100,000. So you're twice as likely to be criminally affected by an actual native-born citizen than you are an undocumented immigrant. But again, how you would hear at America Fest is these people are invading the country. They're invading our Western civilization to remake it. And there's such a delta between the two.
Well, yeah. That is a yeah, it is fascinating. And I know I well, the more I've been, back in uh America and such, and in the South, that I have rediscovered a lot of the ways um people on the right experience the left in dramatically what would you say? Uh mm, ways where they're like, if this is your values, why do you do X, Y, and Z? I mean, I think it's something that exists, broadly, but the what it's animating in
Hmm.
kind of the right wing evangelicalism is, well, at least from my perspective, is such a perversion of Christianity, or at least the one I'm giving myself to, it seems really problematic not to engage
Yes.
and to leave it kind of, outsourced uh, to um, our legacy institutions that haven't kind of adopted, for better or worse, how the public square functions, in the present. So the uh, the can you tell people, like, Project Amplify and such, like, where if people are interested in it, connecting, being a part of it, um, where should we, point people, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So honestly, the biggest thing we need right now is just the funding. I mean, we have a plan. We have some amazing people who have been working with us, who have been kind of building out the strategy, what this might look like. We have a lot of contributors who are on board. Obviously, Utrip, Pete Enns is on board, Jamar Tisby, Diana Butler Bass, Brian McLaren. I can go on to me, Spencer Elms, all kinds of folks who are like, I love the idea. Whenever you need me for something, count me in. I'm like, great. So like a lot of the hard work is done. We just have to get the funding to actually be able to have the bandwidth to hire the right people to make this a consistent thing, because content creation is a full-time job. And to really make it good, you need the right team behind you. You need a producer, you need people who can edit, etc. So if people want to get behind it, we are a nonprofit 501c3 in the US. So all donations are tax deductible. And you can go to thenewevangelicals.com/donate. You can go to our Instagram and donate right through Instagram. You can click, maybe I'll give you a link to put it in the show notes if you want, Trip, but anywhere like that, it would be so helpful to raise the money we need. We're trying to raise $150,000 at the end of this year. And then we want to raise about another 700,000 throughout the next year to really be able to have, again, just the ability, the studio space, et cetera, to really do this right. So we can start making a dent in the counter narrative that is rooted in love, inclusivity, and in the way of Jesus for the sake of all of our neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm excited about it. I'm glad that I keep getting more encouraged when I hear, as you kind of reach out to more people who you'd like to be involved, that they're responding. And I think the reason so many of these different kind of, like, either scholars or public kind of advocates of a more generous account of the faith respond is, you if if you have a platform, you hear from people that are stuck in those other silo systems. I get, I get hate emails and things quite regularly, but the volume of them since 2020 has gone up, and the vehement behind them is so much higher.
Mm.
And the occasional ones that tell you details about your life, you have no idea where they got them. You're like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I just think that there's, like, this is definitely a real need, and so yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited, and I'm really glad that an organization like TNE is helping push things and taking the lead and such. So if y'all are listening, watching, or whatever, then go check it out. If you have that one friend or family member who just, like, loses their biscuits when they see, you know, Charlie Kirk and Company on the internet, and they just happen to also have extremely large bank accounts, then you can tell them, like, like, look at the difference here. Just, like, look
Mm.
at the data, because um, I, there's no way, given how the next election season's going to go in America, that the role of faith isn't going to play a very central one.
Yep.
And um, and if we aren't intentional, then it's going to be shaped by an expression of the church that can either request Tucker Carlson for vice president or curse out the former governor of South Carolina who removed the Confederate flag off the state flag. Um,
Mm.
one of those two that they
Yeah.
were chanting, followed
Yeah.
by strong church worship.
Y-
So if you just think of how many different expressions of Christianity would hurl on the inside at that kind of uh, values being broadcast, then I think you can see just how many people that are actually attempting to live a life of faith are not having the content of our faith engaged or expressed in the public square. And it's
Yeah.
not because the people in those communities don't exist right now. It's because we aren't organized in ways to communicate on the platforms and in the mode of engagement that we currently that our culture's engaged in. Um, do I wish everyone loved 300-page books and long conversations about them? Yeah, that would be great. But since we're not there, and our grandkids will still be on this planet,
Yep.
then
That's right.
we might want to demonstrate a care for something different. So
100%. No, I agree. I mean, I'm motivated like hell to make this thing a reality. I think there's a huge need. And the time is now. We have to swing the bat as hard as we can for the sake of all of our neighbors, frankly.
yeah. Well, thank you, Tim. It's been a blast. Next,
Has it though, Trip? Has it been a blast?
yeah, because I'm looking forward to people that listen to me having to be disturbed like you've disturbed me over the last few years. And though next time we do something, we'll have to do a more fun format. I
Well, I have some ideas
You
I'll
have
be
some
in touch with you
ideas.
about.
That's good.
Yeah, I do. I do. They're fun. These are fun ones.
Yeah, and in the new year, we'll be getting we'll be letting everyone know when Theology Beer Camp is and what's going down. So
Heck yeah.
that's gonna be fun. Then you can come hang out with us. Uh, I don't know if we'll be celebrating America in a real cool way. What was that book you showed me right before we started?
Oh, it was a book called Targeted by
What was her?
yeah.
But what was like her
Her
name?
name is Lindsey Graham. She's known as the Patriot Barbie.
Patriot
This is
Barbie.
someone this is someone I actually became friendly with at America Fest for 2 years, and we've had some really good conversations, like ones that have been very promising.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, she sent me her book to read. And I said, "Oh, thank you." And she even signed it for me. That's very nice of you.
Well,
Thank you, Bart.
I was thinking maybe you could have a book. I know you were thinking, oh, I'm going to write about the new evangelicals, blah blah blah. But what about Patriot Zaddy? And
I'll let my publisher know. Hey, change of
yeah,
plan.
you were like,
I need a whole new manuscript.
I have I have an idea.
That's great.
All righty,
Sweet. Thanks, dude.
bye.